Hello, everyone. I'm Travis Graven. I'm a producer and director here at Iowa PBS, and I'm also a fan of the opera, so I'm glad to be here with my people in this auditorium tonight. We're very pleased to have all of you here with us for this very special preview and discussion of Des Moines Metro Opera Presents American Apollo. Tonight's event is just one example of our dedication here at Iowa PBS to providing quality content, services, experiences, and so much more that educate, inform, enrich, and inspire Iowans. You might have heard those words before. That is our mission. And collaborations with great organizations on events like this are incredibly meaningful to our mission. Celebrating and highlighting the arts has long been incredibly important to us here at Iowa PBS in all of our communities across the state. So thank you again for being here with us tonight. Just a couple of years ago, in 2022, Des Moines Metro Opera celebrated its 50th anniversary. And Iowa PBS actually began collaborating with Des Moines Metro Opera 45 years ago. So we've been kind of in this joint venture for a long, long time. And we are partnering again tonight to bring you this very, very special evening of opera. With me is Michael Eagle, the Des Moines Metro Opera's General and Artistic Director. Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And let's just start out with kind of a brief overview, if you will. What do you want people to know about Des Moines Metro Opera?
Well, that's a big question and a great question. I think I would start by saying, just talking about the art form in general, and that is to say that there is something for everyone in opera. I have yet to meet anybody, and I defy anyone to find for me somebody who can't find something to love some way in about this incredible art form that has so much in it. From the visual to the musical to the dramatic, I firmly believe that there's something for everyone in opera. And everyone can find a way in, and then everyone can find much to love and to enjoy and to treasure about this incredible art form. When it comes to Des Moines Metro Opera, I would say that we have a treasure of an organization here in central Iowa that produces live performance, operatic performances that will be unlike anything you ever experience because of such a unique theater, because of the great storytelling, the wonderful cast, the excellent production values that our organization has. I think we offer a very unique window into this incredible art form through a variety of repertory. And through that and through those qualities, we've really spent the last 50 years, as you mentioned, cultivating a gem of an organization here in central Iowa with a very loyal following and of course, a very long relationship with Iowa PBS that is 45 years old. And it was in probably the vanguard of early broadcasts of live operatic performance. So I would say that there's just something for everyone, and if you've not been, fix that soon. Come to a live performance, and don't wait too long because tickets tend to sell out very quickly for Des Moines Metro Opera performances. So get your tickets now for summer 2025.
And that is a good thing that tickets sell out well. We love that. Also joining us virtually are two of American Apollo's principal artists, Justin Austin, who played the role of Thomas Eugene McKellar, and William Burden, who played John Singer Sargent. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us for this very special event. It's so great to see you both. And Justin, let's start with you. Just tell us, what have you been up to since the premiere of American Apollo, and what do you have coming up this next season?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. It's really great to see everyone. I just finished the Sag Harbor Song Festival this past week in a series of concerts celebrating opera and song and musical theater. I am now at the Jacob School of Music at Indiana University. I am being presented in recital tomorrow, actually. I just finished my dress rehearsal in the recital hall, and the next day I will be giving a masterclass working with the opera workshop students. I'm very excited to be here in Indiana, and then I go off to Los Angeles to start rehearsals for Romeo and Juliet at the Los Angeles Opera, where I also will be singing in their production of Così fan tutte by Mozart in the spring. But in between the two productions, I will be traveling to Germany and doing a solo concert with the Philharmonic Orchestra in Stuttgart. I'll also be going on tour with Terence Blanchard. I'll be singing recitals at the Peace Center and also at the Opera Theater St. Louis. And then I will make my way back to Los Angeles for Così, and then afterwards I will be going to New York for a production of the Brahms Requiem at Carnegie Hall. And then I will end my season at the Opera Theater of St. Louis with another world premiere opera called This House by Ricky Ian Gordon and Lynn Nottage. So lots of stuff going on.
That's wonderful. A very busy schedule, a typical life in the opera. And William, we're going to call you Bill for this informal discussion. What have you been up to since American Apollo, and how about you? What's coming up this next season for you?
Well, I left Des Moines, and on the weekend that the airlines decided to go belly up, and a very dear friend who had come to see the final performance of American Apollo and I wound up driving 12 hours to Buffalo, New York, since our flights were canceled. And I put on my other hat that I am now wearing pretty regularly as a teacher. And I went to the Chautauqua Institution and taught for 2 weeks at the Opera Conservatory there. And then came back to New York, where my wife and I are currently living. And I am on the faculties of both the Mannes School of Music and the Juilliard School. And I have two very active, probably overly large studios at this point that I have, we've now begun. The school year is in full swing. Performances coming up in the next couple of months. So I am currently keeping a 25 to 30 hour a week schedule of teaching. And in addition to that, I have a wonderful concert coming up in December of the Schubert Mass in E-flat minor and the Beethoven Choral Fantasy with a wonderful choral organization here in the city. And then in the spring, I'll be taking part in Jake Hagee and Gene Shear's production of, or opera of Moby Dick at the Met. That'll happen in March, while I continue to teach and get quite a few students graduated in early May. So quite a little bit on my plate at the moment.
Definitely sounds like it. Both of you keep very, very busy schedules. Well, we thank you both for being with us again, and we look forward to hearing more from you. We've got several questions to dive deeper into the production, but first, let's take a look at a preview of Iowa PBS's coverage of Des Moines Metro Opera Presents American Apollo.
Mr. McKenna, may I present Mrs. Isabella Stewart Gardner?
So the origin story of American Apollo starts in the pandemic, with me receiving an email from a dear friend saying, "Have you heard about this exhibit in Boston?" which was running at the Gardner Museum about the discovery of these sketches of John Singer Sargent's last and most important life model. Walking through the museum, it was so clear that the sketches of Thomas McKellar had this life to them. And this story so epitomized that.
Hey, Tom, wait, I think you got a letter. Let me see.
It works on so many levels that is just perfect for opera. It has the historical component of a story drawn from 100 years ago in America's past. But it also allows us to think of contemporary issues and things we're talking about in the zeitgeist, the idea of erasure, who's seen and who isn't seen, whose stories are remembered and whose aren't, and allows us to look at it in a beautiful way, in a way that art does best.
The whole aspect of someone being the most significant body model for one of the most significant painters in history, and yet not being able to ever be portrayed in his own skin and with his face. Both the words and the music really touch the emotion of all of the relationships in this story in a very poignant and personal way. It is something very, very special.
For me, I read the text and I hear the music. If I'm trying to evoke an emotion from a character that maybe they're not saying, but they're feeling on the inside, because that's what opera composers do, is the orchestra. The orchestra doesn't lie, right? They are communicating the emotions that are happening. The biggest thing that people should know is that when you go see an opera, everything you hear, everything you see was a choice that we had to make.
Everything had to be done from scratch, every little bit of it. And when I look at it, and I stand so proud at watching and experiencing American Apollo, because I know that everything was a choice. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I love when you start from nothing, but then you create something wonderful.
Not for Harvard, not for the MFA. Even your art had to hide me away. This is the world we have, our only universe.
The most probably challenging aspect of preparing for a role like Thomas is that there is very limited source material to find out who he was. Thomas is sort of a hidden figure in history, and that's the point of us bringing this opera to the world, is to uncover who he was.
In order to perform this role in particular, it takes a lot of concentration to stay very connected to the score, connected to my colleagues, and also to find myself allowing the moment to be immediate and fresh, and to be open to whatever is going to happen. That's the incredible joy of live performance.
I couldn't help but notice you are in fine physical condition.
I have loved the opportunity to show the generative spark between Sargent and McKellar, but also this generative relationship between Sargent and Gardner, this is Isabella Stewart Gardner. Because to call her a patron of art is a vast understatement. This is someone who is literally creating the context in which people will be able to understand the art that they're seeing.
She's about in her mid to late 70s in this opera. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She didn't hesitate to think outside the box or do things that might not be considered societal norms. It's such a thrill and an honor and a huge responsibility to get to tackle a character like this.
I think there is a significant responsibility when you're dealing with people who were alive. The time that they were living in was so different to our own. When you're creating something from nothing, no story, no adaptation, no anything like that, is very fragile. And I don't think it was an accident that this happened here in Des Moines.
Creating new works of art is a brave act. It takes courage. There's a certain amount of risk involved, but we're fortunate to live in a community, in a state where there is an appreciation of the investment in the future of opera by creating bold new works.
There is nothing like a world premiere. This is the first and only time that this opera will be premiering. The piece will live on, but there's only one first.
And now, Des Moines Metro Opera presents the world premiere of American Apollo.
Nightmares rustling in the trees. Too many angry dead are living to appease. Something clicked, something fell, something broke, didn't tell. But I knew I had to go. Black with white, our voices rose, the night took flight. Betrayal, it's November bright. Never forget what burned that night. Something clicked, something fell, something broke, didn't tell. But I knew I had to go. Out of Egypt, dead of night, all the world with fists clenched tight. We've got here with hoping hand. Gotta believe there's a promised land, 'cause something clicked, something fell, something broke, didn't tell, but I knew I had to go. I gotta go, fellas. I'll see you at the flirtery. Hey, Tom, wait, I think you got a letter. Let me see.
Just a little taste there, a little tease for you, if you will, for the full production. Michael, congratulations on stunning achievement. For myself, as a fan of opera, musical theater, theater in general, when we go to the theater, we want to be entertained, right? But for me, also, there's an element of it making you feel something. And so, as you were talking about in the introduction there, there's the history to this show, but also the lessons, the messages within it that are so powerful and incredibly important for us all to take away from this show. And how exciting is it to be part of an audience for a world premiere, right? To know that you're the first ones to be able to see a wonderful production like this. For our discussion this evening, we've curated a list of questions, some of which were submitted via our public poll, so maybe some of you submitted some questions that we'll be getting to this evening. American Apollo marks the Des Moines Metro Opera's third world premiere. The first one almost 40 years ago, Lee Hoybee's The Tempest in 1986. And then, of course, the 50th anniversary season a couple years ago, Kristen Custer and Mark Campbell's 1,000 Acres in 2022. Michael, if you can, describe for us the process of bringing a show like this, a new opera, and the level that's required to achieve something as great as this and a world premiere of a new opera.
Well, I think that the act of making art, any art, is a brave thing. It takes courage, particularly for the artists, the people appearing on stage, and the ones standing out there singing and making it happen, such as Justin and Bill and others. But the idea of creating something completely new that's going to be seen for the first time. I love Justin's quote in the segment where he says there's only one first time. That's even greater risk, greater reward, greater courage, and in many ways more work. A lot more goes into that. Many more years of preparation, many more years of research, workshop, development, risk, fundraising, and everyone on all sides of the curtain, not just the performing artists, but people on all sides of the curtain, backstage and in the administrative end of things. Everyone is really stretching themselves to create something new, particularly when it comes to opera. We have a wonderful, magnificent, cumbersome, but filled with incredible coming together of all of the art forms, and an art form that has everything in it. And so there's a lot of moving parts to an opera, and in a new opera there's even more moving parts than that. I am so pleased that we started with a great idea, an incredible creative team, two great singers, and also a great cast for whom this opera was created. And a whole bunch of people that rallied around the idea of creating something bigger than themselves and investing in this story. This is a story that I think everyone who was involved in it really felt that they wanted to be a part of telling this story, of helping the world to see that there is another part to this John Singer Sargent story, to the museum murals at the MFA, and everyone really invested in that and bought into that and really wanted to be a part of that story. So I think we had all the right things, all the right pieces came together. And of course, two great singers that we have here tonight. Thank you to Bill and to Justin for agreeing to be with us. We're just thrilled about that. But what a lightning rod moment, I think it was, for everyone involved.
Can you share a little bit more about the origin story of American Apollo and kind of describe for us the process of getting it from that beginning point to where it is a world premiere opera?
Well, no two stories are alike, I think, with any new opera. They all come together in different ways, some ways similar, some ways different. This one, of course, was born from the idea of the exhibit Boston Apollo at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. As was alluded to in the intermission segment there, the exhibit happened right leading up into the pandemic and was based on a series of sketches that had been lost, done by John Singer Sargent of his last great live model, Thomas Eugene McKellar. Bringing those to light through this exhibition, and of course the great portrait of Thomas McKellar that now hangs at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston on the wall. What a rich story there was there, and Damien Jeter and Lila Palmer really took it upon themselves to bring the story to not just further fruition, but to theatrical life. It's one thing to have a great exhibit or a great book, of which there are examples in this particular tale, but to make a theatrical version of that, to give breath and life and words to these characters was a really big, brave, bold act that they undertook. We came across the story during the pandemic. It had been first written for the American Opera Initiative at the Kennedy Center. It was a 20-minute opera that Damien and Lila wrote. I had the great honor of being able to hear it online, because that was the time we were all listening to everything online, and speaking with our music director and principal conductor, David Neely, and really remarking at the seeds that were there in that 20-minute opera. And we reached out to Damien and to Lila and had a conversation about whether or not they felt there was more material. Not just did they feel that they had more material, because I think the answer to that is yes. Clearly there's much more story to be told than will fit in 20 minutes. But did they feel that they had the rapport, the words, the music, the spirit of collaboration together to come up with that? And create a full-length evening opera based on that brief 20-minute fragment? And the answer was yes. And we went forward from there. We were able to secure funding and commitment from artists, and got the green light very quickly, and went forward. So we had about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years of development, from libretto readings to piano vocal workshops to orchestral workshops and all kinds of things that go into that. And finally to opening night in 2024. So it was, this piece was in development, it's safe to say, for about 4 years before we got to that opening night in July 13th.
And we got to see, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the short version, which was great to really get people, I think, excited about.
It worked.
Yeah.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
That was the idea. We really wanted people to get excited about this piece, and so we did the 20-minute version, the original version, in its first sort of fully staged live performance, because the Kennedy Center version had to be behind screens and online and all of that. So we wanted to really flesh it out on stage and to do that. And also to get everyone really excited about the idea that it was coming to the stage. And it worked, because people did get excited. On all levels, from funders to ticket buyers to artists. And there was a lot of buzz. I became kind of fond of saying that it was maybe the most talked about upcoming world premiere of the summer season. People can debate me on that one, but I think it's true. There certainly was a lot of interest around this particular piece, and I think we only just gave it the first performances here. Isn't it exciting that we can now watch the journey of this piece as it goes forward, and we can say, we made that here, we did that here, that started here, and 200 years from now, when people are doing American Apollo, it will say, premiered in Des Moines, Iowa, 2024.
Very, very, very cool. Let's bring Justin and Bill in here. Justin, we'll start with you. What does it mean to you, or what did it mean to you, to be able to perform the role of Thomas Eugene McKellar in this full-length world premiere of a show?
Well, it meant and it means a great deal because, especially to me, because I had the honor of being a part of American Apollo since its very early stages. Um, the production, the 20-minute chamber version at the Washington National Opera, was my first experience with Thomas. It was my first intimate experience with even the work of John Singer Sargent. And it allowed me an opportunity to explore art in a completely different way than I had before. And my wife is actually a visual artist. She's a painter. So I was actually able to utilize her expertise in the preparation for the role. And we just kept furthering our perspective on who these people were, meaning John and Thomas. And it really kind of opened up a whole new door of my artistry and what I brought to the table as a performer and a singer. I was really inspired by Thomas, even in the 20-minute version. When it came to Des Moines, we finally were able to remove the plexiglass and actually be really invested in the characters' lives and the relationships between the characters. And that is when I also got excited about the opera. Michael mentions that the 20-minute version that came on the 50th anniversary of Des Moines, that made everyone excited, but it also made the artists excited. It made me very excited. I didn't know, and I don't think the creatives knew exactly where they were going to go with the expansion of the piece. We didn't know if we were going to take that 20 minutes, keep it intact, add on an act, before or in an act after, or if we were going to take that 20 minutes and try to expand it into something that was full length, or if we were just going to use the 20 minutes as inspiration and basically start from scratch. And that's sort of what they did. There are a lot of themes and leitmotifs that are from the 20-minute version that come back in the full-length version, but they really did start over and kind of create a whole new world of possibilities for these characters and for this opera. It's fascinating to me that this opera is part fiction and part nonfiction. There are these very real historic people, but their circumstances and their relationships are somewhat unknown to us. And there were a lot of liberties taken to kind of flesh out their dynamic. And I think that it was really special for me to have an opportunity to have a say. As opera singers, a lot of times we kind of are, I call it the golden shackles of tradition, where we participate in this art form that has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we find new ways to tell the story of these characters that we have loved for centuries. But with an opera like this, I have an opportunity to flex my creative muscles and my intellect and kind of explore ideas that I have of who this person would be, look at their circumstance, and decide how this person would react to this circumstance, or how this person would feel about, their quarrel, or how their inspiration from their family and their friends, how that impacts their way of life, the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they walk into a room. So it was really great to be able to be a part of the creative team as well as the artistic team. So this is a very long-winded way of saying that it meant a lot to me to be able to continue my journey with Thomas McKellar.
Excellent. Bill, this was your Des Moines Metro Opera debut. What was your experience like jumping into the role of John Singer Sargent for this brand new opera?
Yeah, incredible, in a word. It's Des Moines Metro Opera has this incredible tradition of doing wonderful productions in an incredibly intimate way that allow both the artists and the audience to experience the art form in ways we don't get to in bigger spaces and in other venues. My personal experience with it, because I hadn't done the 20-minute version and I hadn't sort of been able to be a part of a lot of that process, was that I came to it with the finished version that we were going to put on stage, and everything that we did from that moment forward, we got to create in this incredibly intense, short, but intense rehearsal period. And to find what is best about storytelling, which is the humanity that draws everyone into a story. And so we were able to build on what Lila and Damien had given us and to create relationships of trust and intimacy and high emotion and the extreme highs and lows that exist throughout the years that this piece sort of exists, and we got to play and figure out what that was going to be. And because it was still so new even for us, each performance grew and developed and felt unique. And although there was only one first time, what is remarkable about a live performance is that each time we do it, even if it's a piece that's been done over these hundreds and hundreds of years in the history of the opera canon, it is unique to that specific moment. And because this remained so new for all of us, that incredible once in a lifetime experience existed in every performance we did. So the performance that this audience will get to see, and the audiences in future that see this broadcast, this was a once in a lifetime experience. And that is, as an artist, absolutely invaluable.
For those of you who've been paying attention and following Des Moines Metro Opera social media and other sources, you probably already know, but Des Moines Metro Opera has been selected as a finalist in the Festival of the Year category for the 2024 International Opera Awards. What an honor. Those awards take place on October 2nd. That's next week in Munich, Germany. So Michael's got a plane to catch here pretty soon. It is regarded as the Oscars of the opera world, and Des Moines Metro Opera is the only American festival to be nominated this year. So an incredible honor for Des Moines Metro Opera. Congratulations. And additionally, two principal artists from DMMO's 2024 festival season have been selected as finalists in the Rising Star category, including baritone Justin Austin from American Apollo. Congratulations, Justin.
Thank you.
Justin, how did you, kind of a layered question here, how did you prepare for this performance, and what did you discover in that process? Was there a certain level of vulnerability that was different for this role than any other role that you've played? And if so, how did you overcome that vulnerability, or embrace it, or channel it, or however you might characterize it?
This is a very, very good question. It's also a very loaded question for me because I probably learned more about myself and I have grown as a person more in this experience than any other opera or operatic experience I've ever had in my life. I mentioned before that my wife is a visual artist, and part of how I prepared for the role was posing for her and knowing what exactly that is like, what that feels like, what particularly, what I need to be aware of, what it actually feels like to have a cramp from being in one position for too long. There are a couple of moments in the opera where that happens to Thomas, and I wanted to be able to, stay true to the character, also stay true to the circumstance. And I feel like this was an opportunity that I could actually experience a little bit of what he, experience a little bit of what he actually could have been going through. But one thing that I didn't anticipate was the vulnerability that comes with being a figure model. It's one thing being naked in front of your spouse. It's another thing being naked in front of hundreds of people. And that might sound, like nothing, but it was something for me because I've struggled my whole life with feeling inadequate and feeling self-conscious, and feeling, all the kind of toxic things that you learn, growing up as a young man, that you need to be tough and you can't be sensitive and all these things. And I was suppressing a lot of things that I didn't realize until I actually got to the rehearsal room this past summer. Even though I felt like I had done this opera before because I did the chamber version, but the scene where he is naked was sort of kind of just one short scene at the very end of the opera, and then there was a blackout, and then that was it. It was kind of an easy thing for me to wrap my head around. But then on the first day of rehearsal, I learned that for like half of the opera, I'm going to be unclothed, and I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. Oh, wow, okay, I guess I shouldn't eat that bag of Cheetos that I am excited about destroying when I get out of this rehearsal. So it took a lot of mental work. I have a friend who works as a dancer, and he's a good friend from high school. He was an opera singer, then he became a dancer, and he became a model after that. And he's the most confident person that I know. And I called him almost every day after rehearsals, and just asking him, are there exercises that I can do, mental exercises, not physical exercises, that I can do so I can feel more comfortable in my body and in my skin. And one thing that I learned was that, Justin, you have to be comfortable with who you are and accept who you are and love who you are. When you really get to that point, then you will be happy to share that with the world. You will be excited to share that with the world. And so I really had to dig deep and figure out with Thomas, there must have been a certain level of love that Thomas had for himself to be able to be that vulnerable in front of a stranger, in front of multiple strangers, because when he was a contortionist, there was also a level of being unclothed that he had to participate in. And, you know, obviously the relationship with John deepens, and they end up having a really beautiful relationship, a complicated but beautiful. But at first, John is a complete stranger. And Thomas has no idea what his intentions are, and he has no idea what this world is. He has no idea what is normal in the world of a figure model and artist, visual artist relationship. He has no idea what that is supposed to be or what that should be, but he still is able to participate and is able to trust John in a certain way. I think it's there's a certain in the opera we talk about how he needs money to take care of his mother, and Thomas has already solidified himself as someone who fights for his family and for his loved ones, and does whatever it takes, you know, to make it work, to feed his family and to take care of himself and to survive. He's a survivor, but he's not stupid. And he's not going to put himself in a dangerous situation. And I think that there's a certain twinkle in John's eyes that allows Thomas to innately trust him and to be able to be shepherded and invited into John's world. And he goes willingly, and he stays willingly. And I think that says a lot about Thomas, but it also says a lot about John. But I feel like through their dynamic and through who I discovered Thomas was, I gained a sense of gratitude for who I was, and a sense of bravery to go into the world and share who I am and share vulnerable parts of me that I may have hidden before.
A great insight, and very powerful for all of us now when we go back and watch the opera again to know that background. Bill, how did you prepare for performing this role and the attention to every detail? For example, painting with your right hand.
Right, I happen to be left-handed, so I had to constantly remind myself to pick up pencils and brushes with my right hand. I think the thing that I have discovered through my years of doing this is in the exploration of finding the humanity in any character that I am playing, whether they are completely fictional or historical, or some combination thereof, which is what our story is, because he's an historical figure, and there was some poetic license that was taken in the telling of this story that is based on a lot of historical fact, and yet we then extrapolate from it. What I found so amazing, going straight from the score and Damien's music and Lila's text, was to discover how we would explore the relationships between the characters through the music and the text. And that's really how I always go about it. for two reasons. One, I don't really know any other way to get at what we're going for, since even with a lot of historical background, the audience we are playing to only has unless they've had the luxury to explore on their own the background of the story and the characters and source materials and whatnot. All they have is the 2.5 hours that we give them and that they're observing. So those 2.5 hours have to be incredibly clear, or we leave them questioning all the time. And we want them to have, interesting ideas to consider post performance, but we do need to tell a clear story. And so it is incumbent upon us as artists and performers to find that storyline and to create between ourselves, the relationships that allow the audience to take part in our stories. And so that the other side of that is that for me, it has always felt like an emotional protection in a way, that I could allow myself to feel vulnerable as an artist and performer on stage if I felt protected by the character through which I was expressing that vulnerability. Sometimes it's a costume, but more often than not, it's allowing myself to, as best I'm able, inhabit the ideas and thoughts and emotions of a character, and to allow them to become more real than my anxiety and concerns and vulnerability might be. And I happen to actually be a rather anxious and vulnerable person. So my performing life has allowed me to find a somewhat therapeutic strength through performance. But it really is through the text and the music, and then those incredible trusting relationships that are built through a rehearsal process. I can't imagine what this experience would have been like if I hadn't had colleagues like Justin and Mary to experience this with, because there is an incredible degree of emotional intimacy that you have to be willing to share with your colleagues in ways that you don't do at the bank, that you don't necessarily do in other work environments. This is a willingness to come in and create something new, and find what is most real through that storytelling. And so, a very ambiguous way of answering your question, I go in from the score and the libretto immediately, and bring in whatever else I'm able to have learned in my own study. And but I also get to, since no one else in that room at the time would have actually been able to watch John Singer Sargent sketch or paint or interact with his model, a lot of those choices that I get to make come through that process of discovery in the rehearsals.
Excellent. So many good questions that we won't get a chance to get to because time is flying by. But one final question, and I'll give this to each of you. If you can maybe take 45 seconds to a minute or so, you can read each other's minds and you can build on each other as we go. Justin, we'll start with you. How do you believe American Apollo is significant to our history, and how is it relevant to us today?
Well, I think it's relevant to our history because it's a very clear example of erasure and how someone who is as prolific and extraordinary as John Singer Sargent, and we feel like we know so much about him because so much has been documented, that this great aspect of not just his work but his life was completely hidden, right? For obvious reasons, but I think that it's important for us to be open about these things because we know now that it's wrong to shun people that identify with queerness. It's wrong to dehumanize people of color. It's an opportunity that we have with this story to celebrate how far we've come, to celebrate the fact that there is an opera about Thomas McKellar. I think that right now is a very, very great time in history for us to tell this story, because we are in that sweet spot where we can see our wrongs, right? And be able to do something about it, right? And also acknowledge where we are, where we've been, and where we want to be. And I think that with American Apollo, we tell the story of Thomas McKellar, but I think it's really important to highlight the fact that we tell an aspect of John Singer Sargent's story that's been hidden for far too long.
Bill, anything you want to add to that?
Just that in the relevancy of storytelling throughout all of recorded time has been to find the humanity in the story and the links that we can create and observe in that storytelling is timeless. And so this story and the capacity for these characters to find the humanity and in one another makes this story timeless and completely relevant.
Michael?
What a privilege it was for us to be able to tell this story, to be able to balance a little bit the equilibrium in this relationship. Many people know so much about John Singer Sargent, but knew nothing of this other very important, very pivotal figure in his art, and to be the ones to tell that story. I said this earlier, but I think everybody who was involved in this, not just the folks appearing on stage, but people working backstage, those of us who had the pleasure of watching the rehearsal process, were so thoughtful and conscious of the responsibility that we had to bring this half of the story to light. And to start that process, there are 100 years or more of information and stories and paintings and things about John Singer Sargent, or by John Singer Sargent, and how nice it is to take a step towards correcting that imbalance and to bringing this figure to life.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you so much, Justin and Bill, for taking time out of your very busy schedules to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Great insight, and again, congratulations on being part of this amazing, amazing opera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Michael, thank you. Great work.
Yes.
Keep it up.
Thank you for having us, and thank you everyone for being here. We were so pleased to be able to present this piece, and it's because of people like those watching and being a part of this event and attending the performances that make it possible for us to create works like this. So thank you.
And good luck in Germany.
Thank you very much.
You can tune in to Iowa PBS to watch the broadcast premiere of Des Moines Metro Opera Presents American Apollo. That is this Friday, September 27th, 8:30 p.m. So tune in, set your DVRs, or catch it however you normally catch Iowa PBS programming. And we certainly look forward to bringing you more Des Moines Metro Opera productions here on Iowa PBS and celebrating the arts through programs and future events. So thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your night.